Tennessee This Week from WATE's 6 on Your Side starts now.
Hello and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Bo Williams. This week we begin with a topic a number of East Tennesseans are paying close attention to, as well as the entire world, really, the Israel-Iran conflict. Israel and Iran began trading strikes earlier this month. Both military and civilian targets have been hit. And there are fears of the conflict escalating, with President Trump now considering a U.S. attack on Iran. His self-imposed deadline to make that decision within 2 weeks. I am joined now by Dr. Marco Gorman, a political science professor at Maryville College, to talk about this. And we do want to point out here before we start discussing this topic, we record on Friday. This airs on Sunday, and if you've been following this day to day, there is another twist and turn in this conflict. So again, just want to go ahead and put that out there. But first of all, thanks a lot for coming in.
You're welcome.
There's a lot to discuss as far as this current conflict.
Sure.
But I guess first let's go back and just kind of remind everybody how we got here between these two countries.
Right. Israel and Iran have always been very strong adversaries. Where Israel and the world community is always concerned about is that Iran has not only military capacity, but they've, over the past few decades, have tried to enrich the uranium they get and try to turn it into not just uranium for nuclear power, but uranium for nuclear weapons. What's usually you hear it highly enriched uranium. And so for many decades, there's been a concern that Iran's going to, so to speak, get the bomb. In recent times, about 2015, there was an agreement, I think it's called the Joint Cooperation Plan of Action, and you saw a number of countries, United States, UK, France, even Russia and China leaned in and helped make this agreement. And what they tried to do is try to make sure that to really put hard economic sanctions on Iran. If you'd keep doing your uranium enrichment, we're going to economically sanction you and make it real tough to live. Iran agreed, and for about 2 or 3 years, it seemed to work. In 2018, when President Bush came in for his first term, he said no, he wants to go in a different direction, and the U.S. came out of that agreement. And so we've been kind of living in this kind of odd limbo that we kind of try to use that agreement that we created in 2015, but everyone probably has a sense that Iran's probably starting to enrich their uranium again. I think now it's shifting over to Israel. Israel, probably after the October 7th, 2023 attack by Hamas, I think Israel has been very concerned about any ally of Hezbollah or Hamas gaining more power. And so suddenly you saw a sense about 10 days ago where Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, authorized the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, to start attacking bases and kind of the support system that could bring nuclear weapons to Iran. And that's where we are kind of right now until like about 48 hours ago. The constant back and forth of the missiles going back, and then President Trump saying maybe we should pause.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So, I mean, obviously we have seen, and we're all kind of waiting, it seems like the world is right now, to see what the president decides.
Exactly.
We have seen some buildup as far as carrier force and whatnot in that region, but there's a lot at stake here on what the president decides to do. So how vital is this, obviously, to Israel, whether we do or don't? Can they hang on without us? Do we have to get involved? And what does this mean? I know I'm throwing a lot at you here, but what does this mean for President Trump as far as just from a political standpoint as well? Because we've already seen fractions within the Republican Party.
Right. Just to stay with your last question in terms of the political impact, right now you're seeing opposition, not among Americans, saying, wait a second, is this a place that we want to go? Do we want to be part of, for lack of a better word, a shooting war between Israel and Iran? Obviously, we've been the United States has been a long-term ally of the U.S. However, I know that there's a number of Americans, a recent poll said about 60% of Americans, let's not do this. Having said all that, actually what's interesting is that some of the biggest political opposition to President Trump comes within his own Republican Party. I would say you'd call it the populist MAGA wing of the Republican Party, very much want to be focused on America and America first and domestic issues like immigration and inflation, not try to be involved in foreign conflicts or get dragged into, like usually the phrase is, an endless war, and there's a concern that could happen if we start attacking Iran. You literally are getting conservative Republican elected officials like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, I'm not going to support President Trump if he does this. You're actually getting congressmen saying, we're going to make a congressional resolution saying, you can't go there, President Trump, unless Congress says so. So clearly, and interestingly, the opposition is within the Republican Party, not just bipartisan.
What is the rule then? I mean, you said you have people saying, well, you can't do this on your own, but you hear other members of the Republican Party saying, well, you know, if it's just a one-time strike, the president has the authority to do that. So
well,
where's that line?
The line, well, when I teach at Maryville College, is that interesting thing called the Constitution. In Article 2, there's 2 different places you can go to try to find information to either support or slow down, in the Constitution, to slow down, so to speak, the commander-in-chief. In the Article 1, the Congress has the ability to declare war. It actually has the
Right.
word in the Constitution. And the Congress over the years has used that in the modern times to do something called an AUMF, an authorization for the use of military force. And basically it's a congressional legislation saying, okay, this situation is bad enough post 9/11. You, President at the time, Bush, go for it. Go attack, defend American interests. There's talk right now that if this happens, that could be the mechanism that Congress could use to say, okay, President Trump, if you're going to do this, you can't do it without that congressional authorization. So that's the argument saying Congress is going to have the final say, or at least an important say. On the other side, another part of the Constitution in Article 2 is called the Take Care Clause. The President of the United States can take care to execute the laws of the land. And more often than not, presidential advisors have grabbed onto that Take Care Clause saying, you, President, in this case Trump, as Commander-in-Chief, can take care that you're trying to protect American interests and protect our alliance versus Israel. You can go in and attack. And so different parts of the Constitution, one part that gives the Congress some at least ability to slow it down, another part that allows the President as Commander-in-Chief to act.
Obviously, there's a lot of things going on right now, but obviously this is kind of front and center as far as the entire world is concerned.
Absolutely.
But back here at home, midterms are going to be here before you know it.
I know.
And we were talking about this before we went on.
Yeah.
What the president decides to do, and as we've mentioned, there has been some fractions in his own party.
Right.
How does this play out? I mean, as far as what he decides, how could this impact moving forward politically?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because we're in the middle, it's summer of 25 and like, oh my God, we're thinking about the midterms. However, it's important because this will be one of his most significant decisions he'll make in his first term, and politicians will have to vote on it, including politicians in the Republican Party, to support it or not. What will happen among Republican politicians, depending on what level of opposition or support they have, it won't necessarily be the general election in November of 26. It might be the Republican primary early in 2026. Suddenly there might be a Republican challenger saying, you know what, I'm just going to go after you as the sitting Republican congressperson or elected official because I don't think you did it right with the Iran-Israel vote or the Iran-Israel issue. And suddenly you might find a Republican politician, so to speak, being kind of challenged from the right, so to speak, or challenged from within their own party and challenged pretty significantly.
Yeah, keep in mind, that's just a little over 6-7 months away.
I was going to say, yep, exactly.
As far as people sitting here at home and thinking, well, this is all happening on the other side of the world.
Sure.
But there are going to be repercussions. We've already seen oil prices starting to
Yes.
go up. Now, we'll wait to see what it does to gas prices here. But should this conflict escalate, we're talking just not gas prices, but maybe even just the products that we need every day or order because everything comes back to shipping, right? That's
right, exactly. But I think two concerns that come out of the Middle East if suddenly the United States decide to, so to speak, ally with Israel and start adding on attacks themselves, is the fact that Iran is the border country for a lot of the Strait of Hormuz, a lot of the shipping lanes that takes oil out of the Middle East and brings it around the world. Iran could definitely turn that into a choke point, reduce, if not prevent, any kind of oil shipments coming out. And that absolutely raises oil prices. So that could be the one concern. And anytime you're increasing oil prices just straight up, that increases the prices of shipping around the world. It may not be as dramatic as, say, during COVID, where suddenly all the ships are parked off Long Beach, but it certainly will slow down products coming to the U.S. market, and prices will go up.
Let me ask you this. If we do decide to move forward, right, if the president decides to go ahead and join in on this fight and assist Israel, obviously Israel, I've heard a lot of people discuss, what happens after that.
Yep.
We've heard regime change, and we have seen regime change, and sometimes it doesn't go necessarily the way the rest of the world hopes. There needs to be a plan in place, I would think, and you kind of hope that maybe that's what's happening in Washington as well, as they sit down and say, okay, if we do this, then what do we do?
That's right. It's called the end game because it sounds, sorry if it sounds a little bit crass. You can always start a conflict, but it's always how do you end it, and how do you end it on the terms that you are comfortable with. I heard President Trump say a couple of times he's hoping for unconditional surrender. Well, okay, but can you get to a place where you've, so to speak, bombed Iran enough, or you and Israel have done that enough, where Iran gives up? I'm not sure that's the way you're going to get to that end game, and a lot of conflict would get to there before you did. So that's one scenario. Second scenario is the fact that if you're trying to maybe try to topple this regime, the Ayatollah Khamenei, who's kind of the current leader, the concern is change it to what? It could be a change in regime, but that regime may not be that regime that's going to be what we'd hope to be more global and allied with us. It might actually be a more extreme anti-Israel regime change, and now suddenly we've changed them, but they've gone the wrong direction. And so that's always concern. And then anytime you think any country, and I think we've all learned this from past experience in the United States and other countries, anytime you think you're trying to impose your will to change another country, good luck with that. That's tough.
Yeah. Real quick, let me just ask you this, though. I mean, obviously, as they're looking at this and weighing all the options, if they decide to go in, we've been talking about, okay, well, this could happen and this could happen, but on the flip side of it, what's the bonus of going in then?
The argument of bonus of going in is the fact that we're making it very clear that Iran is clearly a first among equals in terms of a bad actor. The argument is pretty strong. They have supported terrorist organizations, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Israel and Gaza. Clearly, they have been a supplier of bad guys for a lot of generations. The argument is maybe it's time to finally, once and for all, take them out. And if a consistent set of air attacks, that seems to be the scenario to think about, that just keeps pounding away at all their different abilities to either fight back or retaliate or to even deliver any kind of nuclear weapons, the argument is that might be a way to say once and for all that America is ending a war rather than creating an endless war. That's the argument. Whether it happens, we'll see.
Yeah, well, and exactly. We're going to have to see how this one plays out. I appreciate you coming in. Thanks. We could probably talk about this for the entire 30 minutes, actually have an extra program.
Sure.
But we're going to wrap it up there and stay with us. We'll have more of Tennessee this week. We'll bring our pundits in. We've got a lot to talk about today. Stay with us. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. We've got a lot more here on Tennessee This Week that we need to talk about. I want to bring in our panel of pundits here for a moment. Joining us today, Courtney Piper, Michael Covington, and Julia Hurley in for Craig Griffith today. Normally we'll talk about what we just discussed in the previous segment, but because this is such a fluid situation that's going on, it seems like every minute there's something different happening between Israel and Iran, the United States, and really the world. We're going to move on and talk about what's going on here in this country right now, more specifically here in East Tennessee. So on Wednesday, the Supreme Court upholding Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for children. So, Michael, I'm going to start with you down at the end. Were you surprised by this, or you thought this is exactly how this was going to play out?
Not surprised at all.
Yeah.
Tennessee is a very basic state, very conservative, I like to think. This was something that I think addressed rushing to get care for underage young people that are confused about their identities. I think it's just a rush, and I think that the Supreme Court made a good decision. The good Lord put pitchers with good arms on this earth to throw 101-mile-an-hour fastballs. Those are pitchers. The good Lord put catcher's mitts on people. They're catchers, pitchers, catchers. The good Lord put you here for a reason. He made no mistakes. If he put you here as a pitcher, you're a pitcher. If he put you here as a catcher, you're a catcher. That's really what Tennessee's law is all about. These young people, they're not in a position to even be able to pitch at all yet. And they're being given these drugs that alter who they are 20 years from now. Makes no sense.
Courtney?
I was a bit surprised by the Supreme Court ruling, primarily because, I've got children with disabilities, and when I think about how I scrutinize over their care, am I making the right decisions? I've got this volume of therapies and options that are available to me. How do I make sure I'm picking the right ones? I talk to my husband, I talk to their doctors, and that's how I make the decision. And when I think about a family that has a transgender child now does not have all those options available to them, they have the government telling them what they can and cannot do, what options are and are not available to them. It's just really, it's a head scratcher for me, because you're taking away one tool out of a parent's toolbox to make the best possible decisions that they feel like they can make about the care of their children. And to me, it's a head scratcher for that reason.
Julia, where do you kind of lean on this one?
I think I'm in the middle,
Yeah.
which I don't think I ever would say in any conversation we've had here. I agree that it is taking away a tool of the toolbox for a parent to make a decision for their child. Yes. I also agree that Tennessee's a very conservative state politically, and that comes buckle of the Bible Belt. There are conversations there that are entwined, whether we want them to be or not. And I think that the Supreme Court made a decision that the government in general likes to make a lot of decisions that impede on a lot of people's decisions and rights and capabilities, and this isn't necessarily the first one. I don't think it's going to be the last one that they make, and we'll continue to see groups that support this continue to rail against the machine, I guess you can say. So as it stands, we will follow it, but I feel like this will be a conversation in the future for sure.
I'm just curious as to at what point a child becomes transgender, and that's not a That's not a
Michael,
set of
that's not for you to decide,
Well,
or
I'm
me,
trying
or
to
Julia.
determine who is
It
determining this.
It is up to, so if the child is a minor, your parents make decisions about the care of their children. It is not up to you. It is not up to me.
No,
It
I
is
was
not
just
up to
trying to
anybody
determine,
up here.
at what point does
to
a child
make-
become
and
transgender?
that is my point. It's not up to us to make that decision. It is up to parents and their doctors to talk about what options are available to us and which of those options are we going to pursue. Which ones do we think are in the best interest of our child?
Let's take a moment here. We heard from both sides here recently. First, we want to play a clip here from Representative Jason Zachary. Let's hear what he had to say. Obviously, he was big in pushing this forward, so let's take a listen to his reaction.
When you're 18, when you're an adult, that's your decision to make. Of course, I don't agree with it, but that's your call. And so we always do what we can to protect children here in Tennessee from the womb all the way to 18. And so this is just a big step and a big win for our state and our nation.
And again, I think that is something to point out. So the way it stands right now, and Julia, I just saw you react there. You know, it's up to, I guess it would be not quite 18. Once you're 18, you're an adult. So let me get your reaction. I saw.
Yes, and at 18 you are an adult, absolutely. And Tennessee has one of the highest childbirth death rates in the country. So we're really doing a great job of protecting those children in the womb. I'm just gonna leave it there.
Okay. Well, let me play another clip here. This is Dustin Fowler. He is with South Knoxville Pride. We got his reaction as well.
You know, it's a very disappointing decision. It feels like we are taking 20 steps back in this world. It's 2025 and we're stepping back to 1953. And it feels like we're trying to take away safe places for people to be who they are and who they were born to be.
Courtney, does this kind of go along with what you were saying just a few moments ago?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to removing a tool from parent and caregivers' toolbox, it's also sending this broader message that we don't want those kinds of people in the state of Tennessee because we don't think they have a right to exist until they are over the age of 18 and can make their own decisions. So, you know, I don't like the message that it sends, and I also don't like the government interjecting itself into medical and family decisions.
Another part of Jason Zachary's comments that he made that we didn't play for you there was the fact that he said that they have heard from people who had gone through some type of surgery and then later said, I think I made a mistake, but there's no way to go back. Michael, is that kind of where you're going?
That's what I'm saying. There are too many unknowns at this point. My mind is not closed to it. I just don't understand it well enough to think that it really is best for these young people who seem like they need more therapy than they need treatment for something that will be irreversible.
A lot more discussion needs to come out of all this, it seems like. And how do we go about doing all
Look, Bo, I'll say too, you can find any number of individuals that have complex medical conditions that their parents made one choice for the minors, and then as they get to adults, they're like, I don't know if I really like that.
Right.
Parenting is not an exact science, and you know, we try to make the best decisions we can every day with our child, and we should have all options available for us to do that. No parent gets it right 100% of the time.
All right. We have one more clip. Let's play this real quick before we head off to the break here from Jonathan Skermetti. He had some comments as well once this ruling came down.
This is a law regulating the practice of medicine in Tennessee. It is not the one-size-fits-all solution to all questions anybody has about these issues. There's a lot of research to be done. There's a lot of debate to be had. There's a lot of litigation undoubtedly to come.
And that kind of goes along with, I guess,
Exactly.
There's still more to come here. There's still
Yes.
more research, more discussion that needs to come, Julia.
Well, the state of Tennessee, again, has no problem impeding on other specific medical decisions that can or can't be made for people's bodily autonomy. I'll leave that there.
All right. And so we're going to leave it there right now. We're going to head off to the break. When we come back, we've got a lot more to talk about on Tennessee This Week, so stay with us. All right, welcome back to Tennessee This Week. On Tuesday, Knox County Schools released the details of its investigation of the West High School football program. It's something that we have been following here at WATE as well. The head coach now will be reassigned. You have 2 assistants now who are facing charges. But Knox County Schools coming out. We heard from the school superintendent midweek. Courtney, first of all, let me start with you. As far as West and how the school system, of course, as far as the crime, or, the charges, that's KPD that is dealing with a lot of that as well. But we're just kind of focusing on the Knox County school system. So your thoughts after hearing this news conference?
Just an infuriating situation overall. I heard the superintendent say that there was a severe lack of oversight for this whole situation. And of course, that does fall with the football coach. It also can fall with the principal or the athletic director. But, what I've also learned as this story has been developing is that the head football coach had cell phone numbers for all of his players, that it was policy that players text the coach when they miss practice. And I'm going, why do minor students have the cell phone number of an adult, and why does that adult have the cell phone number of the students? Knox County Schools invest in messaging apps so that parents can message their teachers without having to email or text them. Why can't the same sort of technology exist for student to coach communication? So, there's that piece of it, and I have not fully looked into if Knox County Schools has any sort of policy about cell phone use between minors and teachers and coaches. The other part is Knox County Schools took fairly swift action to address this situation. And when I compare it to, let's say special education, which is something that I've been involved in, the superintendent and Knox County Schools went through a 2-year dog and pony show of public engagement before they took even the first step to meaningfully reform special education in Knox County Schools. And that, to me, as a taxpayer, as a parent, is just frustrating.
Julia, what do you think after you saw this and how this is all played out? We should point out here again, it's the 2 assistant coaches that are facing charges. The head coach has just been reassigned.
Sure.
But again, let me get your thoughts when you saw this and been watching this and how this is all played
out. It is tragic. It's not even a correct word for it. It's deplorable. It's inappropriate. They did take swift action. That was something we rarely see. It's appreciated. Wish Blount County would have done the same. So we have this happening in schools all around us. It happens in athletics. I mean, you talk to, if they'll open up to you, former NFL, NBA, a lot of the former athletes that are well into their 60s will now talk about some of those same conditions. This is not new news. It's finally being brought to light. I think we will see more of it. I think a reassignment of that coach is not enough.
Okay. Yeah, and I think there's still more
Sure.
to be played out here. Michael, I'm looking at your facial expressions here. Let me get your thoughts.
And both of my fellow panelists have made reference to how quickly the school system reacted. And I don't doubt that they did react quickly. I'm just curious as to why DCS wasn't involved early. Because had DCS been involved early, we wouldn't know a quarter of what we know now, because DCS, once they're involved, everything gets shut down. So we've been able to hear a lot about what it is that transpired and what actions the school system took. I'm just curious as to why DCS wasn't involved, as DCS has been called in other sensitive situations.
All right, I tell you what, we could talk about this as well for quite some time, but I know we want to take a moment and talk about the passing of Frank Nicely. Julie, I'm going to let you start off. I know a lot of you want to have something to say here.
Yeah, I served with Frank Nicely on the State House before he was moved up to Senate. And he sat in front of me, and 4 state representatives before him had carved their name in a pool stick. And this was before they got the updates at the state, the House, and the seats. When you lean back, you would almost fall out of them. They were so, they're 100-year-old seats. They're so hard, we almost fell out. So everybody got a pool stick handed down to them, and Frank Nicely handed his down to me. Oh, wow. And he handed it to me across the back of my desk. He said, hey, Hurricane, here's your voting stick. Here, click it, and you don't even have to lean up. I said, yes, sir, that sounds great. So I still have it. Frank Nicely was a good man, very educated on Tennessee politics, and especially farming, and really knew the history of the state of Tennessee. So he will be missed.
Yeah, and Courtney, we've heard that from a lot of state politicians who have come out and paid their respects with those same type of sentiments.
Frank Nicely was one of the most conservative members of the Tennessee General Assembly, and he was also one of the most direct and the first one to ever call out anybody's BS. And for that, I will remember, everybody's got a great Frank Nicely story. We can't share 75% of them on the air. They're very colorful. But he will be remembered for his time and his service to the state of Tennessee.
Michael, got just under 30 seconds.
A really genuine person, a really nice guy. I had him on the radio a couple of times. I always felt like Frank Nicely really knew me personally, and we'd never met.
Wow.
He was that kind of person. So rest in peace, Frank. He lived a great life.
And of course, the best going out to his family as well. Keep them in our prayers. And we appreciate you joining us. And we will see you next week on Tennessee This Week.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6 on your side or Nexstar Broadcasting.